What will you do when you face your fear face to face? Will you run away? Will you attack? Or will you just stand there? Many people run away from their problems instead of solving them. My cheating wife was one of those problems. I was perched on the car hood parked in front of room 128 when the door swung open and they stepped out. She noticed me, and her complexion turned pale. Her eyes avoided mine as she looked away. As I slid off the hood, he raised his hands defensively, and I remarked, "Don't bother. Neither of you is worth my time." I walked over to my car, got inside, and drove away. A lengthy backstory had culminated in that confrontation. I first met Jim when his family moved next door. He was 8 years old, the same age as me, and he was the only boy in our neighborhood. Although there were several girls about my age at school, Jim and I were the only boys, which naturally brought us closer together. By the time we entered the 4th grade, our relationship had become as strong as twin brothers. We played minor league baseball together and participated in the Pop Warner football game. We always had each other's backs. If someone bothered Jim, they bothered me, and the same thing happened to others. Our friendship remained unbreakable throughout high school. In 10th grade, I met Laura, and we started dating. In the penultimate grade, we were already a regular couple. Meanwhile, Jim started dating Annabelle Spears, and the two couples went on dates twice. The night of our prom, Laura and I spent our first time in the next room, where Jim and Annabelle were doing the same thing. After graduating from high school, our friendship changed. Jim was not interested in going to college, so he enlisted in the Navy. Annabelle was furious with him, calling him every conceivable derogatory word for leaving her. Despite her anger, she told Jim that she would wait until he found a permanent job before joining him. Laura and I attended college together. I enrolled at Eastern Michigan University to pursue a degree in civil engineering, while Laura chose the University of Michigan to study information technology. The University of Michigan in Ann Arbor and EMU in Ypsilanti were only about a half-hour's drive apart, which allowed Laura and me to maintain a relatively steady relationship. I say relatively because a few times, Laura canceled our dates to go out with some guy she met at U of M, though she never told me about it. I found out from friends who also attended Michigan, who mentioned that she was dating on the evenings I didn't visit. The situation escalated one night when I drove over and arrived just in time to see her getting into a car with a guy and driving away. I followed them to a restaurant on Ann Arbor Road, waited 10 minutes for them to enter and get settled, and then went inside. I found them in a back booth, sitting side by side instead of across from each other. He had his arm around her, and she made no effort to remove it or create any distance between them. Fortunately, there was a booth on the opposite side of the room where I could sit, ensuring that Laura wouldn't overlook me. However, it wasn't until the waitress approached to take my drink order and Laura heard my voice that she turned in my direction. I was acting as if I were reading the menu, not directly facing her, but I noticed her eyes widen. Suddenly, she pushed the guy's arm away and distanced herself from him. The expression on his face clearly conveyed, "What are you doing?" It was obvious that this wasn't their first time together, not even the second or third. They had been together long enough that he felt comfortable putting his arm around her, knowing she was okay with it. I have no idea what they discussed, but Laura kept nervously glancing my way while I sat there pretending not to notice her. After finishing my meal, I got up and left without giving Laura a chance to see me looking at her, and then I drove home. The following day was Friday, and Laura and I had our usual dinner and movie date planned for the evening. However, that Friday, I skipped our appointment without notifying her. I simply didn't show up. I turned off my phone and relaxed with a good book instead. On Saturday, I attended a party at the Delta Phi House and had a wonderful time. There I met a beautiful dark-haired woman named Robin. We danced a few times, and she gave me her number, asking me to reach out to her. On Sunday, I was deeply focused on studying for Monday's classes when the doorbell rang. I got up, went to the door, and looked through the peephole to see that it was Laura. I opened the door, and she pushed past me to come inside. Then she turned to me and said, "Where have you been? Where were you Friday night, and why haven't you answered your phone?" I closed the door, faced her, and asked which question she wanted me to answer first. "What?" "Those were 3 questions. Which one do you want me to answer first?" "Don't be clever, Rob. What's going on?" "All right, I'll answer them in the order I choose. First, where have I been?" "Mostly here, although I did go to a frat party on Saturday night." "Next, why haven't I answered the phone?" "That's easy. I haven't answered it because it hasn't rung. My mistake, of course, since I was the one who unplugged it. Lastly, where were you Friday night?" "I was here. I ordered a pizza and spent the evening reading a very good book." "Why didn't you reach out to let me know you weren't coming over?" "I assumed you were already spending time with your boyfriend." "My boyfriend? What are you referring to, Rob? You're my boyfriend." "Really? Then who was that person you were being so affectionate with at the restaurant last Thursday night?" "He's just someone I know, and we weren't being affectionate. Being seated close together, you leaning into him with his arm around you. Doesn't that seem affectionate? What would you call it then?" "It meant nothing, Rob. We're just friends." "If you didn't believe you were doing anything wrong, Laura, why didn't you come over to say hi? Maybe you could have invited me to join you so you could introduce me to your friend. Perhaps sit with me and have a brief conversation before returning to your date. Is it possible you avoided that because he might want to know who I am and you didn't want to tell him? Why didn't you get up and come over if it was bothering you so much?" "Because I wanted to observe how you would act." "Observe your behavior? Why would you do that?" "Because many people have told me that you date a lot when I'm not around. I've also heard that you've been seeing other guys on nights you canceled plans with me. So yes, I wanted to see how you interact with another man." "Rob, you don't own me. There's nothing that says we're exclusive." "I thought there was, Laura. I remember giving you my class ring and my letter sweater as signs that we were committed." "A letter sweater? A class ring? Committed? Come on, Rob, that's so high school." "Maybe, but it happened in high school, and when we graduated, I don't recall you returning those items or saying, 'We're out of high school now, so everything changes.' But that's all right. Since you don't feel obligated, I suppose I can see it the same way. I did meet a nice girl at that fraternity party, and she gave me her number, so I'm free to call her now." Laura gave him a harsh look and snapped, "Fine. Go ahead, I don't care," before walking away. Once she was gone, I reflected on how she hadn't made any excuses, hadn't promised it wouldn't happen again, and hadn't tried to assure me that I was her only one. To her, she was no longer a high school girl. She was an adult, and things were changing. That essentially told me to move on. It wouldn't be easy since we had been together for so long, but it was better to understand her perspective now rather than later. I was overwhelmed with homework on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, so it wasn't until Thursday that I managed to call Robin. We chatted for a bit, and then set up a date for Friday night. I picked her up, and we went out to dinner. Instead of seeing a movie, she decided to attend a party she was aware of. The party was held at an apartment in Belleville, and we arrived shortly after 8 o'clock. And wouldn't you know it, things had to go sideways. The first people I saw when we walked in were Laura and the guy she had been seeing on Thursday night. "Oh, fuck!" I exclaimed. "What's wrong?" Robin asked. "Them," I replied, pointing towards Laura and the guy. "Do you know them?" "I know her." "Do you know Miss Piggy?" "Miss Piggy. That's her nickname." "Why does she have a nickname like that?" "She's promiscuous, a real pig, so someone labeled her Miss Piggy." "Are you certain she's promiscuous?" What else would you call a girl who has a steady boyfriend she claims she's going to marry but spends her time hooking up with other guys when he's not around? Do you know this for sure? I mean the hooking up part? Number. To be fair, I don't know her personally, but several guys have told me they've been with her. You didn't mention how you know her. I was the boyfriend she planned to marry until I caught her last Thursday with the guy she's with now. Oh boy, are we in for any drama? Number, I broke up with her on Sunday. We're officially done. What are the chances I'd hear from you if Thursday hadn't happened? Almost none. But since Thursday did happen and we're here to have fun, let's just enjoy the evening. She took my hand and led me through the room to introduce me to our host. Laura, who had been facing away when we entered, saw me and looked shocked. I wasn't sure if she was surprised to see me at a party like this, or because I'd caught her with her new boyfriend again. I ignored her as Robin introduced me to a tall man and a tall blonde woman. She introduced me to Gary and his wife, Ardis, and we made small talk for a few minutes before Robin led me away to get us drinks. The basement had been converted into a leisure area and was currently serving as a dance floor. Robin and I danced, enjoyed a few drinks, she introduced me to some people, and I had a wonderful evening. Whenever I saw Laura, she was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite understand. Around 11 o'clock, Robin mentioned it was time to leave because she had something important to attend to on Saturday. We found our hosts and said our goodbyes. While driving Robin home, she remarked, "Your ex seemed to be watching you a lot tonight." She was probably just surprised to see me here. No, it felt like she wasn't happy to see you with someone else. That's her problem. She was the reason I ended our relationship. Maybe, but I don't think she's pleased about it. Perhaps not, but she'll need to get used to it. Does that mean I'll be seeing more of you or that you're going to start dating multiple women? I'm the type to date one person at a time. I enjoyed spending time with you tonight and plan to ask you out again. Until you say no, you'll be my one girl. What if I'm not ready to commit to being with just one guy all the time? Then you can say no when I ask, and I'll look for another girl to date. If she says no, I'll reach out to you again to see how you're doing. If it's still no, I'll find a third girl and continue this process until I meet someone who never says no. Well, I like your attitude and I see potential, so maybe we can give it a try. How about tomorrow night? Sounds good? I walked her to her door and said goodnight, but as I was leaving, she asked me to wait a moment. I turned back and she said, "I never kiss on the first date, but I guess there's a first time for everything." And then she kissed me. "See you tomorrow," she said as she went inside. When I arrived home, my dad was still awake and mentioned that Laura had called, sounding upset. I told him it was too late and that I would handle it the next morning. As usual, I slept in late on Saturday morning. When I finally got up and went to the kitchen for my first cup of coffee, my mother told me I needed to call Laura. She's already called twice this morning. Not until after I've had my first cup of coffee. Are things not going well between you two? We're no longer together. Does she know that? She should know. She was the one who decided. Just then the phone rang. Mom answered and said, "It's for you." It's Laura. I took the phone and said, "Hello? Why didn't you call?" It was too late to reach out when I got home last night and I just woke up this morning. That's not what I mean. Why didn't you call me yesterday evening to arrange our usual Friday night date? We discussed all of that last Sunday, Laura. You told me we weren't exclusive and that you wanted to see other people. I said if you're okay with dating others, so am I, and then you left the house angrily. I didn't mean it, Rob. You should have understood. Don't give me that nonsense, Laura. I already saw you out with that jerk last Thursday. I wasn't with him, Rob. I went to that party alone, and he just happened to be there. Sure, Laura, whatever you say. It doesn't matter anymore. I'm hearing all sorts of things about you and your actions, like how you got the nickname Miss Piggy. I don't know what you've heard, Rob, but it's not true. Why wouldn't I believe it's true after seeing you with your friend at the restaurant? And I don't buy that you just randomly met him at the party. He was too close to you and had his arm around you when I arrived. No, Laura, you're not interested in being exclusive with me, and I'm not interested in being just one of many. I'd appreciate it if you could return my class ring and leather sweater. I realize they're too immature for someone like you and probably mean nothing to you anyway. Goodbye. That sounded pretty final, my mom commented. She decided that being my girlfriend wasn't enough for her, and as I just told her, I'm not interested in being second choice. I started spending time with Robin all the time, and about 2 months into our relationship, we became close. It was then that I realized how inexperienced I was. Laura and I used to have a great relationship, but our intimacy was mostly banal. Robin was completely different. She was much more experienced than me and was eager to correct my shortcomings. She tried to make our intimacy exciting. I'd have to admit that she pretty much had control over me. But deep down, I always knew that Robin and I didn't have a future together, and the day would come when she'd eventually break away from me. I hoped it wouldn't happen, but I was mentally preparing for it nonetheless. In the meantime, Laura made an effort to stay in touch. She'd send me cards for Valentine's Day and my birthday, and she'd call every couple of weeks just to check in and see how school was going. Occasionally, I'd see her at parties, and she never seemed to be with the same guy twice. She'd smile and wave at me, but she never approached me for a conversation. Naturally, Robin noticed and would tell me she knew Laura was interested in me. But she's not going to get you because you're mine, and I don't share. All I could do was smile and say, "Yes, dear." During that time, I was receiving letters from Jim about every 2 weeks, updating me on his life. He had completed boot camp and moved on to specialized training. He was assigned to the Naval Construction Battalion, also known as the Seabees, where he was learning construction and demolition. He never asked about Annabelle, so I avoided mentioning her in my replies. Not that I would have anyway. He wouldn't have liked hearing what she was up to. Less than a week after he left, Annabelle was already involved with some guy she met at a party. A month later, he was out of the picture, and she had moved in with a guy from her workplace. 3 months after that, she was living with a black guy who had towed her car to the shop when it broke down. I can't confirm it, but I heard she was doing things for his friends at his apartment. Then, out of nowhere, Annabelle disappeared, and no one knew where she had gone. That is, until I got another letter from Jim. He had finally completed his training and was stationed in Norfolk. As soon as he got there, he sent for Annabelle and she joined him. Wish you could have been here to be my best man, but we didn't have much time to plan. The sooner we tied the knot, the sooner we could get on the list for base housing. Poor guy, I thought. The first time he ships out, she'll have someone else in her bed before the door even finishes closing behind him. I didn't have any financial worries since my grandparents had established a college fund for me at birth. It was enough to cover my tuition and let me rent an off-campus apartment if I wanted. So, at the start of my junior year, Robin and I moved in together, and I got a glimpse of what married life might be like. I enjoyed it. After about 6 months of living together, I started thinking about making it permanent. I still had that small nagging feeling that what I had with Robin might be too good to be true, but she didn't show any signs of wanting to end our relationship. That is, until the day I suggested we start looking for an engagement ring. That's when she told me that after graduating, she planned to return to California and marry her childhood sweetheart, who was currently in England on a Rhodes Scholarship. He knew about me, and she knew all about the English girl he was living with. We both knew there was no way 2 healthy young adults with strong intimacy drives could go for several years without intimacy, so we decided to have an open relationship. It wasn't supposed to change anything for us, Rob, at least not immediately. We still had a year before graduating and moving on. But of course it did affect us, or at least it affected me. Essentially, what happened was that I went from what I believed to be a romantic relationship to something that felt more like a casual fling. The issue was, I wasn't the type to be satisfied with just that. I needed more from a relationship than just physical connection, and gradually, Robin and I started drifting apart. The physical aspect was still there when we went to bed at night, but our daily interactions, the kind that couples naturally have, became tense and forced. 4 months to the day after Robin put an end to my romantic hopes, she turned to me and said, "You don't really want to be here, do you?" I admitted that I was feeling uneasy and explained why. "I'm sorry, love. I almost wish I didn't care so much about Alex, so I could be more of what you want. Honestly, if it weren't for Alex, you'd be my man." Thanks, I guess. So what now? Do we flip a coin to decide who stays and who leaves? No need. I saw this coming. My mom hasn't rented out my old room yet. She thought it was best to keep it open until I hit 40 or give her grandkids, so you stay, and I'll go. Still friends? Always. She pulled me into a hug, kissed me in a way that made my knees buckle, and then asked, "One last night, please?" I'd been home for a week, and on Friday evening, while I was in my room working on a paper due the following week, my mom called up the stairs. "Rob, someone's here to see you." I went downstairs and found my mom chatting with Laura. She looked at me and said, "I'll leave you two alone," and then headed into the kitchen. "Hi, Rob." "Hey, Laura. How've you been?" "Not great, but I'm hoping things will improve." "Oh?" "Robin told me you were back on the market and said if I was quick I could be first in line." "Why would you want to be first in line? Why even be in line?" "There wouldn't be a line if I hadn't messed up. In fact, there wouldn't have been a Robin at all. I don't want to be in line, Rob. I just want to be where I belong." "Where you belong?" She lifted her left hand and said, "I never gave you your ring back." On her ring finger, she was still wearing my class ring. "There's a party at Alice Johnson's place tonight. Want to take me?" At the party, she stayed close to me, and when I asked her about it, she said, "Just letting everyone know I've staked my claim, baby. I've got you back, and I want everyone to see it." I admit I was pleased that Laura was with me again. The real surprise happened after the party. As we drove away from Alice's house, Laura sat down next to me and began to act in a new way. I was so shocked that I almost drove off the road. "If you can't afford a motel, the back seat will do for me." I immediately regretted giving up the apartment to Robin, but fortunately I had enough money for a motel room. Laura, who came into that room with me, was not the person I broke up with. She was incredible, and we got down to business. What she did to me cannot be described in words, and after everything that happened between us, she hugged me tightly to her. Tears were streaming down her face, and I asked what happened. "Nothing, baby. I'm just happy. You're back. I have you. And I'm happy." Finally, she let me go, and I settled down on the bed next to her. She snuggled up to me, and we lay there in silence for about 5 minutes before we started the second round. It was wonderful. It was definitely the Laura I remembered. While I was driving her home, she was silent, just looking out the passenger window. About halfway there, she turned to me and said, "I'm sorry, baby." "I'm sorry for what?" "For what we did tonight?" "Why? I thought it was great." "It was great. But I'm sorry because you weren't the first person I did this kind of thing with." The truth was, I was really upset that I hadn't been the first to experience those things with her, but I let it go and said, "Don't forget, you weren't my first for those things either, but maybe that's for the best." "How can you say that?" she asked. "Think about where we were before. We were together for almost 2 years and never tried any of the things we did tonight. It never even crossed my mind. If we hadn't broken up, would either of us have changed, or would we have just kept things the same, doing it the old-fashioned way, never trying anything new? Robin was very experienced, and she quickly taught me what I needed to know to make her happy. I'm not trying to brag, but I think I'm a much better lover now, and I'm guessing you feel the same. I wish things hadn't turned out that way, but there was some benefit in the end." Laura gave me a thoughtful look, but stayed quiet. When we pulled up to her house, I asked if she wanted to join me in apartment hunting on Saturday. An apartment would be a lot cheaper in the long run than constantly staying in motels. "Is that your way of asking me to move in with you?" she asked. The thought did cross my mind. "What time?" "Around 9. "Okay, you've got yourself a date." Eventually, Laura and I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment located between Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti. We turned the second bedroom into a study with a desk for her computer and one for mine. About a month after we moved in together, Jim came home on a 30-day leave, and he and Annabelle spent a lot of time with Laura and me. Jim and Annabelle seemed to be getting along well, so I thought maybe I'd been wrong in my earlier judgments about her when she left. 3 weeks after Jim went back to duty, Annabelle showed up again. Jim had been deployed to Iraq, and Annabelle decided she didn't want to wait at the base for his return. Within 2 weeks of being back, she was living with the same guy she had been with before she joined Jim in Norfolk. 3 weeks later, she was seen with her ex, a guy she used to date, and rumors began to spread again about her involvement in terrible things at his house and other wild acts. I considered confronting her, but Laura convinced me not to. She said it wasn't our business, and maybe Jim and Annabelle had an open marriage. I've heard it's not unusual in the military for couples to agree it's okay to have fun during long separations. That doesn't sound like something Jim would agree to. "So, what are you going to do? Write to him and tell him? He practically worships her. He's not going to thank you for telling him she's cheating. He'll probably end up blaming you for ruining his life. Just let it go, Rob." Jim returned from Afghanistan just in time to be the best man at my wedding to Laura. Afterward, he and Annabelle headed back to Norfolk, where Jim finished the last 9 months of his military service. Once he was discharged, they came home, and Jim found a job as a heavy equipment operator for a construction company. The next 2 years flew by, and Jim and Annabelle were frequent visitors at our house. We hung out with them at least once every 2 weeks. Everything seemed fine between Jim and Annabelle, and there were no signs of any infidelity. Laura speculated that maybe Annabelle had a high intimacy drive, making her susceptible when Jim wasn't around, but that Jim satisfied her needs when he was home. That seemed like a reasonable explanation, and it held up until Jim's company won a contract to do pipeline work in Alaska. The harsh conditions led Jim to leave Annabelle at home for the 4 months he'd be away. However, within a week of his departure, Annabelle was seen entering a motel with Gary Mellows, the owner of Jim's company. After that, Gary's car was regularly spotted in Jim's driveway nearly every night. The Alaska job encountered issues, extending Jim's absence by another 2 months. Laura and Annabelle shared the same doctor, and Laura happened to be at the clinic the day Annabelle received shocking news. She was 7 weeks pregnant, though Jim had been away for over 3 months. Laura found out because 2 nurses who had gone to school with us and knew she was close to Annabelle asked her how she thought Jim would handle the news. Apparently, patient confidentiality took a back seat to gossip. After thinking it over, Laura said, "Jim will never know. If I'm right, Annabelle will get in termination of pregnancy, and it'll all be taken care of before Jim comes home." But things didn't go that way. Someone else, who didn't have a Laura to stop them, informed Jim of what was happening. He flew home, rented a car, and staked out his house. When Gary pulled into the driveway and went inside, Jim waited 15 minutes, then entered with a digital camera, catching them in the act. 15 minutes later, EMTs arrived after a 911 call, and Gary was taken to the hospital. The police arrived and were about to take Jim into custody, but he showed them the photos he had taken. He used a Canon Rebel camera set to continuous shooting mode, and the sequence of pictures clearly captured Mellows getting off Annabelle and charging towards Jim. While Mellows may have just been trying to grab the camera from Jim, the way the shots were laid out made it obvious that Jim was being attacked and acted in self-defense. The police accepted this explanation and left. 20 minutes later, Annabelle was standing on the front porch with a suitcase, and the door was locked behind her. The divorce was straightforward, and so was the lawsuit Jim filed against Mellows for alienation of affections. He also sued Mellows for intimacy harassment RNT, claiming that Mellows had only hired him to send him out of town so he could pursue his wife. Mellows could have settled out of court and kept everything private, but he made the mistake of fighting the case, which led to the public revelation of his actions with an employee's wife while the employee was away for long periods. The jury ruled in Jim's favor, awarding him $1.3 million. After legal fees and taxes, he was left with just over $750,000. He used the money to pay off his house, install an in-ground swimming pool, and buy a new Ford F-350. Once the divorce was finalized, Annabelle disappeared, with rumors saying she left town. Mellows had to sell off some of his equipment and property to pay for the lawsuit, and his business suffered as customers and potential clients decided that anyone who would do something like that to an employee couldn't be trusted. With some of his settlement money still remaining, Jim approached me with a proposal to start our own business and go after the clients Mellows had lost. I would handle the engineering side, and Jim would take care of construction. After discussing it with Laura and reviewing our finances, we decided to go ahead, and R&J Constructors was born as a partnership. The business did well. Not only did we pick up many of Mellows' former customers, but we also outbid him on several jobs. Jim made sure everyone knew whenever we won a contract over Mellows, capitalizing on human nature. The next 5 years passed quickly. Jim dated around but never found anyone he wanted to settle down with. He spent a lot of time with Laura and me, and we would go out about once a week with Jim and whoever he was seeing at the time. The business was thriving, and Laura had risen to the position of regional manager at her company, with a strong chance of landing the next VP role. Life seemed perfect, though unfortunately, it wasn't. One Tuesday, I had just finished a lunch meeting with a potential client when Gary Mellows approached and offered to buy me a drink. I didn't have any personal issues with Gary. In my view, if someone like Annabelle threw herself at a single guy like Gary, you couldn't really fault him for accepting the offer. I never believed the rumor that Gary sent Jim out of town just to get to Annabelle. I had always known Annabelle to be promiscuous, and I figured she probably went to Gary's office to pick up Jim's paycheck and hinted that she was feeling lonely with Jim away. Whatever the case, his issues were with Jim, not me, so I accepted his offer for a drink. As soon as he sat down, he asked, "How's business?" "Not bad, but it could be better." "Have you thought about selling?" "Selling? Why would I do that?" "So I can make Jim your partner." "Are you out of your mind?" "Not really. I hate to be the one to show you this, but take a look." He opened his briefcase, pulled out a folder, and handed it to me. I opened it, and what I saw left me speechless. The first photo was of Laura and Jim holding hands as they walked into a motel room. There were several more pictures of them entering or leaving motels, and others of them kissing and hugging in different places. One even showed them kissing in the back seat of Laura's car. They could have done that in the front seat, so it wasn't hard to figure out what they were about to do, or had just finished doing. I looked up at Gary and he said, "I'm sorry. I organized surveillance on him in order to collect dirt on him and take revenge. When the private investigator gave me these photos, I didn't know that she was your wife. I realized from the rings in the photos that she was married, so I asked a private investigator to find out who she was so that I would have this information when I started acting." "Why?" "You were guilty. You did what he accused you of." "No, I didn't do that. Yes, I had an affair with his wife, but I never sent him out of town to her. She came into my office, locked the door, and started harassing me. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "You sent Jim out of town, so you need to take care of me until he gets back." I'm single, and like most guys, I love women. So how could I refuse Annabelle? In my opinion, Jim was to blame for this whole situation from the very beginning. Everyone knows about Annabelle's reputation. She's been like this since high school. Jim should have known. He should have, but he didn't do anything. No, Rob, he framed me with this lawsuit, and I'm going to get my revenge. I'm just sorry that you ended up in the middle of all this. Do you have any idea how long this has been happening? The PI found that it's been going on for at least a year, maybe even longer. How on earth could it have gone on that long without me finding out? If she never gave you any reason to be suspicious, how could you have known? So, why do you want to buy me out? What do you stand to gain from partnering with Jim? Think about it. As an equal partner, I have just as much influence. If he says we need to do A, I'll push for B. No matter what he wants, I'll be completely opposed. Plus, I'll know what jobs we're bidding on, and I'll make sure my other company underbids him. I'll destroy the company, and Jim will be left with nothing. But wouldn't that hurt you too? Not really. I've done the research. If the business goes under, we sell the assets, and I get a good chunk of my money back. I won't make a profit except from my other company when I underbid Jim, but I won't lose too much either. What if he chooses to kick your butt every morning just to start his day off right until you've had enough and end up selling your share to him or someone else? The last time he caught me with his wife, and all I could think about was getting the camera away from him. He managed to get 3 good hits in before I realized I should be defending myself instead of worrying about that damn camera. Next time, it won't be that easy for him. In fact, I'm pretty sure I can take him if it comes to that. So, are you interested? I might be, but first I want to do a little research of my own. If you do decide, do you have a rough idea of what you'll ask for? I gave him a number, and he said it could be possible. He told me to give him a call if I decided to go through with it. I left the meeting with Mellows feeling completely unsettled. How could Laura and Jim have been carrying on behind my back for almost a year without me having the slightest suspicion? I hadn't noticed a single thing that suggested Laura was unhappy with me. There had been no change in her affection, and our intimacy life seemed fine. Or so I thought. 3 or 4 times a week, with plenty of foreplay. We cuddled on the couch watching TV, and every night she'd fall asleep pressed against me. She couldn't walk past me without touching me, and in the car she was like a teenager, always scooting over to sit next to me. So, what had gone wrong? While I had no reason to doubt Gary's detective's report and photos, I knew pictures could be altered, and Gary had his own motives. I needed to be absolutely certain before making any decisions, so I went back to the office and called a friend who worked at an insurance agency. I asked him who they hired to investigate suspicious claims. Armed with that information, I made an appointment. 13 days later, I had my proof. On Wednesdays, when Jim was supposedly visiting job sites, he was actually meeting Laura at the Comfort Inn on Melrose. I had no clue how she managed to take time off work for these meetings. Now all that was left was figuring out what to do. In reality, I already knew what I wanted, but I needed to find a way to make it happen. 2 hours with a lawyer gave me a list of what I could and couldn't do, along with a few recommendations. We lived in a no-fault state, which meant everything had to be split equally. My concern was making sure she didn't get a penny from the sale of my share of the company. Eventually, I had to accept that the only way to achieve that was to lie. Even then, she would still get some of it. I struck a deal with Mellows to sell him my share of the company, but only on paper for 1/3 of what he actually paid. That 1/3 went into a bank account solely in my name, while the remaining 2/3 were funneled into an offshore account I had set up. The agreement was that Mellows wouldn't show up at the office to take over my desk until the day after I served Laura and Jim with the papers. Laura would get divorce papers for adultery, and Jim would be served for alienation of affection. Even though we were in a no-fault state, I could still sue for adultery, and depending on the judge, it might result in a better split than the usual 50-50. For the adultery claim to hold, I needed solid proof. After reviewing reports from both Gary's PI and mine, we saw a pattern. Every time they met, they used the same motel, and it was always on Wednesdays. My detective rented a room and set up cameras to record everything, and a nice bribe to the desk clerk ensured that Laura and Jim would be placed in that room. On Wednesday morning, I called Maria, our receptionist, and told her to inform Jim that I wouldn't be in due to a dentist appointment, and tell him if I'm not feeling well after getting the tooth pulled, I might not make it in this afternoon. "You got it, boss. If I were you, I'd just go home and rest. Getting a tooth pulled always hurts like hell once the laughing gas wears off." After Laura left for work, I circled back to the house. The locksmith arrived at 9 to change all the locks. Once that was done, I headed to the bank to clean out the accounts and the safe deposit box. My lawyer had advised me to only take half, but I wasn't in the mood to make things easy for Laura. She'd get her share eventually, but only after putting up a fight. I also withdrew the funds I thought I was owed from the business. If I took too much, Jim could always go to court and try to reclaim it, but as long as I held it, it was mine. At 12:10, my detective called to confirm that the happy couple had arrived and were in room 128. I drove over, exchanged a few words with my detective, and then sat on the hood of the car parked in front of their room, waiting for them to come out. After the brief confrontation, I got into my car and drove away. As I was leaving, a man stepped out of another car, approached them, and served them. Along with the divorce papers Laura received was a temporary restraining order, requiring her to stay 500 feet away from me and the house. I had to bend the truth a bit to get it, claiming that I had heard from a third party that Jim and Laura were overheard talking about my life insurance and speculating on the value of my share in the business. There would be a hearing to determine if the order would become permanent, but that could take a couple of weeks. It was just another way to mess with Laura. The main thing was that she couldn't enter the house without a court representative present, and I had no intention of being around to hand over the keys to the new locks. Included with Jim's alienation of affection lawsuit papers was a brief note that read, "You know how these lawsuits work, right? How does it feel to be on the receiving end of one?" As I drove away from the motel, I called Gary on my cell. "It's done. Have a great first day at the office tomorrow." I drove to the airport, parked in the long-term lot, tossed my phone into the glove compartment, and flew to Cabo San Lucas. I spent a week scuba diving and relaxing on the beach before heading back home. When I turned my phone on, it was flooded with voicemails. Unsurprisingly, most were from Laura, but there were also 4 from Jim. I would have never thought he'd want to talk to me. Either way, I had no desire to speak to him or Laura. Would I have liked an explanation? Sure, I would have liked to know why, but I had already decided to leave them both behind and move on with my life. Understanding their betrayal was just baggage I didn't need. My lawyer knew I'd be gone for a week, so I called him to let him know I was back. He suggested I call Laura, as she'd been trying to reach me through him multiple times a day, desperate to get into the house to retrieve some of her belongings. I was about to tell him to arrange something through the court for her supervised access to the house, but then an idea struck me, one last way to mess with her. I called her myself and asked what she needed. "I need to get my clothes and other things, but I can't get in, even with court supervision, because I don't have a key, and they won't allow me to break in. There's nothing left for you to pick up. I donated everything to Goodwill. I didn't want a single thing of yours in the house to remind me of your deceit. Nothing of yours is here anymore. Not even a hairpin. Rob, you had no right to do that. I had as much right to do that as you had to betray me. We need to talk, Rob. It's not what you think. Get real, Laura. I don't think you were sleeping with Jim. I know it for a fact. Goodbye, Laura. I hung up. Of course, her belongings were still in the house, but it felt good to make her think otherwise. Eventually she'd get her things, but it wouldn't be any time soon. I'd always gotten along well with Maria, who was our receptionist, secretary, bookkeeper, and pretty much did everything around the office. So I called her to check in and see how things were going. I'm doing fine, but the company's not doing so great. Nothing's getting done. Gary and Jim are constantly bickering over the smallest issues. Jim gives orders to do something and then Gary says not to. Jim orders supplies, and as soon as he leaves, Gary cancels them. We've got projects waiting, but they're just sitting there because Jim and Gary can't stop arguing. Last Friday, I'd had enough and handed in my notice, but Gary offered to double my pay if I stayed, so of course I'm sticking around. Oh, and the two of them actually had a fist fight on Thursday. They both took a beating, but no one really won, though Jim did end up with a broken nose. Why did you leave us? Why did you sell your share to Gary? I explained the situation to her, and after a brief pause, she said, Well, I guess I have one more reason to stay. What's that? I can help Gary. I never liked Jim. He was always hitting on me, even though he knew I was engaged. Once he even suggested he'd fire me if I didn't go out with him. We both know what he really meant by go out. I asked what you'd think about him firing me, and that shut him up. You should have told me. Why? It was a personal issue, and I dealt with it. I'm sorry about you and Laura, Rob, but there might be a silver lining for me. How's that? It means you're back on the market. How do you feel about being pursued? I thought you were engaged. I was until I caught my fiancé doing to me what Laura was doing to you. When did this happen? About 3 weeks ago. Well, for what it's worth, I'll put you at the top of the list when I'm ready to start dating again. But it won't be any time soon. I don't want to give Laura anything she could use against me. I can wait. Just remember me if you get lonely and want some company for dinner. I will, sweetie. And thank you. My phone rang 16 times that day. 14 of the calls were from Laura and 2 were from Jim. I couldn't for the life of me imagine what that jerk would want to say that I'd care to hear. And if he was calling to ask for something, there was no way he was getting it from me. I deleted all the calls and headed home. I made myself some dinner, and then, on a whim, I called Gary Mellows to ask how his plan was going. Not bad at all, he said. I made sure to be sitting at your desk when Jim arrived. He saw me, scowled, and demanded to know what the hell I was doing in the office and sitting at your desk. I just laughed and told him I was his new partner. The look on his face was priceless. You could practically see steam coming out of his ears when he read a copy of our agreement. I got things started off right almost immediately. Jim ordered a fuel truck because some of the equipment at the Wilkins site was running low on diesel. As soon as he left the office, I called and canceled the order. One of the skid steers ran out of fuel, and Jim called Allied, cussing them out. They told him I had canceled the order and that they didn't have to take that kind of attitude from him, suggesting he get fuel elsewhere. He came back to me, furious, asking what the hell I thought I was doing. I told him Allied was charging us too much and that I was shopping around for a better price. Things went downhill from there. I heard from a little bird that you two got into a fight, I said. Yeah, things came to a head last Thursday, Gary admitted. How did that turn out? I might have been a bit optimistic when I said I thought I could take him, but I held my own and did manage to hurt him. Well, keep at it, and good luck with your plan. After ending the call, I went into the room I had turned into an office, powered up my computer, and started writing a resume. I planned to begin job searching the following day. I was busy typing away when the doorbell rang. I opened the door and found Jim standing there. What do you want? We need to talk, Rob. No, we don't, you jerk. It wasn't my fault, Rob. She came on to me. She caught me at a low point after what Annabelle did to me. I wasn't thinking clearly, Rob. I'm sorry, but it wasn't my fault. I didn't pursue her. But you knew she was my wife. You remember how you felt when you found out about Annabelle, and you didn't even stop to consider that you were doing the same to me, did you? You had to know I'd find out, probably the same way you did about Annabelle, through someone else. Well, guess what? I did hear it from someone. As far as I'm concerned, you're trash. You were supposed to be my friend, and even if I believed that Laura came on to you, which I don't, you should have turned her down, just like I turned Annabelle down when she made a move on me. You knew better, but you went ahead anyway. And even if it's true that she made the first move and you weren't thinking clearly, it doesn't justify the second, third, or however many other times after that. No, man, you stabbed me in the back, and there's no coming back from that. So why didn't you just beat me up? Why did you put the responsibility for Mellows on me? Because at the time I found out about it, I was so angry that if I had come after you, I probably would have done something bad, and you're not worth going to jail for. Besides, if you're left with Mellows, you're going to have more problems in the long run than any beating. But you know what? The anger I felt has now passed. I hit him hard, and he started to fall. I grabbed him by the shirt, dragged him into the house, kicked the door shut, and then seriously dealt with him. By the time I finished, he was unconscious. I dragged him outside, shoved him into the car, and you won't believe what a big smile I had when I returned to the house. The cops might come after me, but I wasn't worried. All I would have to say is that he attacked me, I defended myself, and that he got angry because I sold my half of the business to Mellows. It's that simple. The following morning, I sent out 14 resumes and then contacted my attorney to check on the status. He informed me that we had a hearing regarding the temporary restraining order the upcoming Monday, but there had been no response from Laura or any attorney representing her. I considered reaching out to Laura directly, but ultimately decided not to. The longer it took her to get legal representation, the more time I had before needing to make any concessions. Throughout the week, I received several replies from the resumes I'd sent, and by Wednesday I flew to Atlanta for an interview, followed by another in Baltimore on Thursday. Both interviews went well, but I also got a response from a company in San Diego, which piqued my interest. I liked the idea of living somewhere warm, so I scheduled an interview with them for the following Tuesday. Monday came, and we had the hearing for the temporary restraining order. As expected, the judge found no grounds to keep it in place and ordered me to give Laura access to the house. Laura was present at the hearing, accompanied by her lawyer. She approached me, intending to say something, but I walked away to get my attorney before returning to her. You're not to say anything to me unless my attorney is present. All I wanted to say is that I'll be coming by this evening. No, you won't. I'm flying out for a job interview at 2:30 and won't be back until Wednesday. You can come by any time after 6. Her lawyer tried to interject, but I cut him off. She will not, and I repeat, will not be in that house unless I'm there to oversee everything she does. There will be a court-appointed official present to ensure everything is above board, and you could also have a representative from your attorney's office there. No, that won't work. They wouldn't know what she might be taking. They'd just make a list, and if she took something she wasn't supposed to, I'd end up having to fight to get it back. She hasn't been in the house for 2 weeks. Another 48 hours won't hurt her. Her lawyer shook his head and said, "Then I suppose we'll see what the judge has to say," before turning back to consult the court clerk. But Laura stopped him. "Just forget it," she said. "I can wait another 48 hours. I glanced at her and said, "Wednesday at 6, before turning to go. "Hold on, Rob. Can we talk then?" "No," I replied, and walked out of the building. I felt the interview in San Diego went well, and I headed home, hoping to hear from them soon. Laura showed up right at 6, accompanied by someone from her lawyer's office. A woman from the court arrived at 5:40, and we spent those 20 minutes chatting over coffee. She explained that her role was simply to observe for the court and document the items being taken. She would also list any disputed belongings, but I told her there was no need. She can take whatever she wants. If that's how you feel, why have you been so tough about things involving her? She betrayed me, and she did it with the man who had been my closest friend for over 25 years. I couldn't beat her or hurt her, not if I wanted to stay out of jail. But I had to do something to make her pay. It wasn't much, but at least it was something. Then the doorbell rang, and I let Laura and the person from her lawyer's office in before going outside to mow the lawn. When I finished and came back inside, everyone was gone except for Laura, who was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. She looked up when I walked in. "You lied. You didn't give any of my stuff to Goodwill." "Maybe not, but I sure loved hearing the outrage in your voice when you said I had no right to do it." "I didn't think it would be all her stuff, and it's going to take longer than I expected to get it out." I pulled my key ring from my pocket, took off the house key, and slid it across the table. "Don't worry about moving it out. You can have the house on Friday. I'll have all my things out by then." "Why?" "I'm interviewing for jobs, and as soon as I land one, I'm moving out of state." "Why did you do all that if you were just going to give me the house and leave? Why the restraining order and the lies about giving my stuff away?" "That's a ridiculous question. After what you did to me, I had to retaliate somehow. Just be grateful I chose a peaceful way instead of something violent. What I did to you doesn't even come close to making things even, but it was the best I could do without ending up in jail." "I know you said no when I asked if we could talk tonight, but I'm still going to try and convince you that we don't need to get divorced." "Get real, Laura. There's no way we can stay together after what you did." "But it didn't mean anything, Rob. I love you, and you know that. What happened with Jim was a mistake, just a stupid mistake. I like Jim. I've always liked him, but I don't love him, and never have." "I don't care whether you loved him or not. You still slept with him, and whether it was love or just liking him, it was still cheating. You should have known how I'd feel about that. Remember how upset I was over what Annabelle did to Jim? I was so angry that I was going to tell him, but you convinced me not to. That should have clued you in on how I would react if you did the same thing to me. And don't give me that 'I didn't mean for you to find out' excuse. Cheaters always get caught. Sooner or later they always do. Jim found out about Annabelle because someone saw her messing around and told him. That's exactly how you got caught. Someone saw you and Jim go into a motel room and told me. Doesn't it matter at all that I love you? No, Laura, it doesn't, because it wasn't enough to stop you from cheating. But it didn't mean anything, Rob. I swear it meant nothing. It was just a mistake. An accident. How could it be an accident that I slept with a man who was my best friend? He came to our house while you were in Santa Fe. He was worried about Annabelle, even though he had cut her out of his life, but he still missed her. We had a few drinks, and after a while he started crying. I hugged him, trying to comfort him. I still can't explain how it happened, but somehow we became close. And as much as I hate to admit it, it was amazing. I remember thinking, this is so wrong. I shouldn't have done it, but it feels incredible. Later I realized that it was so exciting because it was forbidden. It was the thrill of cheating. The next time you were out of town, Jim came back, and we both knew exactly why. We did it again. There was no love lost between us, Rob. As corny as it sounds, it was just intimacy. Just a little excitement in my life. I love you, Rob. I really want to, and you know it. We'll get through this. We don't need to get divorced. This isn't about we, Laura. I need a divorce. I can't stay with someone who has betrayed me. It's that simple, Laura. You betrayed me. If I stayed with you, I'd spend the rest of my life constantly watching you, waiting for you to do it again. You admitted that you kept cheating because it excited you. How long until you remember how thrilling those moments were? How long until you want to experience them again? You can promise all you want that it won't happen again, but your promises mean nothing. You already vowed to forsake all others when we got married, and you broke that vow. I can't trust anything you say, Laura. Jim's version of events doesn't even align with yours. According to him, it didn't just accidentally happen, you pursued him. Either he's lying, or you are. The problem is that after what you both did, I trust neither of you, so I can't decide who's telling the truth. The bottom line is, Laura, that we are over as a couple. I'm not giving up, Rob. I'll fight the divorce. I believe we can get through this because we love each other. You're angry with me, and you have every right to be, but I can promise you, and this time I'll keep that promise, especially now that I see what it's costing me. My attorney says we can get the court to order counseling, and I know that will help. I love you, Rob, and I'm not letting you go. You just don't seem to understand that I don't want to be with you anymore. Okay, I admit that I still love you, and it's going to take me a while to move on, but there's no way I'm going to be able to live with you again. Every time I went to bed with you, I thought about you with that jerk who was once my best friend, and I refuse to live like that. You're not going to fight the divorce, Laura, because if you do, I'm going to post the video of your last meeting with Jim that I have. Every family member, every friend, and all your colleagues will see it. I'll even create my own adult website for you. It will make your life full. That's a lie, Rob. There is no such video. Really? Wait here. I went into the office, took a copy of the CD out of my briefcase and handed it to her in the kitchen. Look for yourself. After you watch it, you can decide if you want someone else to do it. Now, if you don't mind, I need to take care of something. You can take over the house on Friday, but you need to leave now. By Thursday and Friday, I had moved out, packed up most of my belongings, and rented a room in the executive suites for a month, hoping to find a job by the end of that period. Over the next 2 weeks, I traveled to Salt Lake City, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Chicago, and Detroit for interviews. I felt confident about all of them, but none of the companies got back to me. I reviewed my finances and realized I could manage for about 6 years without a job. This prompted me to explore cities and states with a lower cost of living, aiming to stretch my savings to last 8 or maybe even 10 years. Laura signed the divorce papers and sent them to my attorney. Oddly enough, I almost regretted that she did. I would have liked to expose the CD of her and Jim, but an agreement is an agreement. The settlement worked in my favor. We agreed on a 50-50 split of assets, with each of us covering our own attorney fees. Since I was the one who filed, I paid the court costs. Laura wanted the house, and since my share of the equity was roughly equal to what I'd already withdrawn from the bank, it balanced out. I had to give her half of what I earned from selling my share of the business, but I had anticipated that. She complained that I sold out too cheaply, but it didn't bother me because 2/3 of what I earned from the sale was securely hidden. Interestingly, word got back to me that after I stepped out of the picture, Jim started pursuing Laura aggressively, to the point where she had to get a restraining order against him. Not that I cared, but I did find it amusing. I decided to wait until the divorce was finalized before taking any action. Finally, I started hearing back from some of the companies I had interviewed with. One company in San Diego called and asked me to come back for another discussion. But before I could arrange it, I got a call from Gary Mellows. "How would you like to have your company back?" "Why would I want it back? I sold it to you so I could leave and get away from Jim. Why would I want to be his partner again?" "You wouldn't have to. After our last argument, I told him, "If you're so unhappy with me as a partner, I'll either buy you out or you can sell your share to someone else." He barely thought about it before asking me how much I'd pay for his half. He accepted half of what I gave you. But still, why would I want it back? If you did even half of what you said you'd do to screw Jim over, the company probably isn't worth much anymore. You might be surprised. Come down to the office and we'll talk. I figured I had nothing to lose, so I went to talk to him. When I walked through the door, Maria jumped up from behind her desk, hugged me, and then peeked into the office to let Gary know I was there. "As you're aware, I only bought you out to mess with Marshall. I didn't really want it, and it didn't serve much purpose for me. But things have changed. I'm becoming more involved in the construction side of the business, and I want to move away from engineering. One reason is that I couldn't get the engineers I wanted, so I started thinking about my options. The idea that came to me was to call you and ask if you could set up a company I could contract for my engineering work. But then Marshall sold out to me, and I thought, why not just sell the company back to you and work with you instead? I can't afford to buy back both my share and Jim's. You won't need to pay that much because the company isn't worth as much anymore. Since I own everything now, I transferred all the construction work and equipment to my other company. I'm leaving only the engineering side. I'll sell the company to you for what I paid Jim, and I'll sign a 5-year contract for engineering services. Plus, the company still has contracts with around 15 other firms. I don't see how you could lose." "How much did you pay Jim?" He told me, and it was less than what I had in my offshore account. "There's just one condition." "What's that?" "I don't keep any secrets from Maria, and I ran the idea by her. She said if you take the deal, she's staying with you and won't be moving to my company. So, if you agree, she comes with the package." I didn't have to think too much about it and told him I'd accept the deal, but just to be cautious, I wouldn't proceed until my divorce was finalized, which wouldn't be for another 3 weeks. Gary agreed, and we sealed the deal with a handshake. As I was leaving the office, Maria said, "I overheard. Don't forget, when those 3 weeks are up, you promised I'd be first in line." "I didn't think you were serious about that." "Oh, you can bet I am," she replied with a beaming smile. As I pulled away from the curb, my phone rang. It was my attorney. Jim had learned his lesson after seeing what happened to Gary when Gary had fought his lawsuit. Jim had called my attorney with a settlement offer. I told my lawyer to accept it. The rest of the drive to my room at the executive suites was spent with a huge smile on my face. In 3 weeks, I'd be able to start fresh, with a new job, a new girlfriend, and money in the bank. I could spend those weeks finding a new place to live and shopping for furniture. Who says nice guys always finish last?